Hello, everybody. So much the same. Hello, everybody. Then I clear my throat. I should do that before I hit record. But yeah, hope everybody's good though. Otherwise, let me adjust my microphone. I think I'm pretty good. Bring it up there a little bit. This mic is not the best. It's sort of a low quality Chinese mic that I bought for like $35 on Amazon. So this Rodecaster has a lot of settings I need to go through at some point. Well, I've sort of gone through them and tested them, but there's just so many. Well, yeah, look how much better that is. So I guess talk like the guys on the other shows into the side. That gives you the low bottom. They call it the big bottom. So yeah, I guess tonight I'm going to get into a little bit of the UFO topic. Out at my local establishment, as I often am on weekdays, and get into some pretty good conversations with people on numerous topics. So tonight, a couple friends were there, and a couple came out, and then one that I haven't seen in quite a while, she showed up, and got to catch up with her. That was sort of nice. And then a girl and her husband, I know, they had a friend in town from out of town, and somehow the topic of UFOs came up, and she mentioned Tom DeLonge and the Bob Lazar Rogan podcast. Good stuff. Let me switch over here. Yeah, that's one I'm going to show you in a minute, but let's do YouTube. Yeah, I'm so often on YouTube. I know I pay for premium. I hate to support them, but I hate ads too. So I'd rather pay the $16.99 and not have any ads. So yeah, they were talking about the JRE, Lazar. Well, no, not Tom DeLonge. It was Jeremy Corbell. Yeah, that was a good one. That's like the whole thing.
First of all, cheers, gentlemen. Let's have a little toast. Relax. Bob, thank you very much for doing this. I really appreciate it. I understand that you've told this story many, many times. You've been grilled many, many times, and it's very stressful for you, so I really, really appreciate your time. For people who don't know the story, there is a document.
I mean, Bob Lazar, it was exciting just to see him on Rogan, because Rogan, he's been around for a while, but not back, like the show, the podcast, the Rogan podcast hasn't been around back into the 90s. So it was sort of exciting to see Lazar, who I used to listen to on the Art Bell show, the Coast to Coast AM, back in the 90s. And then to see him fast forwarded into the future. This was June 20th of 2019, episode 1315. It was exciting to see somebody from the old guard, the old crew, talking to somebody who's now so popular in pop culture in the world, Joe Rogan. It was just, yeah. And then Corbell, I guess, produced or directed Bob Lazar. It was a Netflix special, I want to say. I think it was a Netflix original, Lazar, and then his whole story. I'll let it go for a minute, but I'm not going to play it for super long. I'm not going to go into a reaction or a commentary type video.
Jeremy Corbell has a documentary out right now. It's called Bob Lazar, Area 51 and UFOs.
And Flying Saucers.
And Flying Saucers.
Bob Lazar, Area 51 and Flying Saucers.
Okay. Yeah. I first heard your story decades ago. I told you last night when we went out to dinner, I've seen pretty much every interview you've ever given. I've followed the story incredibly closely. Mm-hmm. But for people who don't know the story, let's give them the bullet points. You used to work at Area 51. And Area 51, you went like, huh?
Well, we want to be accurate.
Okay.
Area S4.
S4. Okay.
It's about 15 miles south of Area 51.
Okay.
But
You worked in how would you describe it?
I guess within the Area 51 compound, you can call that a subset of Area 51.
And you got that job. Before that, you were working.
Before that, I had worked at Los Alamos
Right.
National Labs in New Mexico.
And you were involved in what kind of work there?
Nuclear weapon development, physics. I mean, they do everything there.
So how do they approach you to say, hey, Bob, why don't you come on out to the Nevada desert?
Well, the way this went down was, at that time, it was 1982, I had put a jet engine in my Honda. And
That's sort of a good place to pause a jet engine in his Honda. That's where he got started and sort of became popular around his workplace. And I think there was a newspaper article done on it, which sort of proves that he was where he said he was and was working where he said he was working, even though the records were covered up and they tried to say he never worked there and stuff. I think it wasn't Corbell, but it was George Norrie, I believe, which is George Norrie, I think, sort of took over the Coast to Coast AM after Art Bell passed away. But George Norrie, I think it was Norrie. It was another guy too, but that hosts the Coast to Coast program that did like investigative stuff on Lazar to find those records. And he found like a telephone directory, like a sheet. I think it was at Lawrence Livermore with Bob Lazar's name on it. So, or it might have been B. Lazar or something, but how many people are named Lazar? So that's sort of proved that there was a cover up and everything. And he's very well spoken, and he's even outside of this whole UFO thing, he's very well known in other circles as well. So listen to that. I'll try to remember to put it into the description. That particular JRE episode, that was before he went to Spotify, so it's still on YouTube. But, it was, again, that girl I talked to at the bar, that friend of a friend who just happened to be traveling through the area tonight. She just asked me point blank, like, what do you think of, like, Lazar? And, it was Tom DeLonge that she originally brought up. And I sort of got DeLonge and Corbell confused. But, so, it was just sort of being an old-time, quote-unquote, conspiracy guy and everything. It was sort of nice to hear somebody else bring up a topic without me having to do it myself and be seen as like a conspiracy theorist or whatever. This was just a normal person as far as I could tell. I just met her that night, so she may be into all this stuff, and she had mentioned that she heard about it on a friend's podcast. So it's just good to see people's eyes starting to open to these topics. And then when it came to like us continuing to talk and getting into things, World War III and the nukes and Russia and everything going on right now sort of came up, and I've sort of made a joke, and it's sort of common in the UFO communities that it would be awesome if like, the aliens could just like come down over the Capitol. Like here was one in 1952 over DC, July 12th, 52. Sort of, it was after Roswell, but sort of before the Gemini, and the Apollo missions kicked in. So, and there's these like ships just flying over. I think they played them on the news. That's where this footage comes from. Look at that. They're clearly moving. I mean, they're not moving quickly, but I mean, if you consider that the distance that the camera is from the Capitol and then the distance from the Capitol to approximately where the objects would be if they were like traditional size, I mean, they're still moving at a pretty good clip, pretty good pace. in sort of a formation of sorts. So that was pretty neat. That's one that I bring up that not many people have seen, but it's again, it comes from, I believe, well, let's see if it even says. Famous UFO sighting was captured on film in 1952 over the Capitol building, Washington, D.C. Okay, that's sort of getting into what I was talking about, reports that they were flying at 7,200 miles per hour. And then they have links to all kinds of other things, but then, like I said, it'd be neat if they came down over the Capitol or, the United States, but then there was this other one here. I'll let it play a little bit, but it's like a triangle. I remember seeing many different videos of this from different angles, including people who were just driving up like 95 or near the Pentagon, and they, it was like on a camera phone, like a smartphone, maybe 5-6 years ago, 7 years ago, I don't know, but you could barely see it because it wasn't illuminated, but with the city lights shining up on it, you could see these big pyramidal, or they're calling them tetrahedral, shapes hovering over the Pentagon and the Kremlin. So let's play that. That comes from Gaia TV, which is pretty good. Yeah, you can see it sort of there in the background. 2018, 2009, so like 9 years apart. Get the dramatic music in there. So there were multiple, this is the one I'm talking about, 3 friends traveling. This was over the Kremlin. You can see it up there in the sky. It's dim. Okay, that was more during the morning. I think it was there for a while. Then that same night was that crazy aerial phenomena over Norway in that same time period. Everybody tried to say it was coming from the CERN thing in Switzerland or whatever. Sort of like a wormhole, Deep Space Nine type stuff. And malfunction in a missile test. They'll do anything to cover it up, to make it look like they weren't helpless to the object hovering over the city. 3 hours. So that's sort of what we need now, with the, sorry about that, with the Russians threatening, nuclear annihilation if we interfere. Putin threatens West with nukes. He says he's not bluffing, mobilizing, trying to draft an additional 300,000 people, and a few of the people that I follow in Russia, younger YouTubers and stuff, some of them have moved to Georgia, and there's a few that are still there, but they're objectors. I mean, in a way, they're talking about how they're going to be sort of forcefully conscripted into the military, and I sort of wanted to chime in a little bit, and I wasn't even alive during the Vietnam days. It ended just before I was born, but I sort of wanted to mention, the conscription or whatever, even though they probably won't get the same training that our soldiers do or whatever, it's very similar to what happened in Vietnam with the draft. I mean, even if you didn't want to be a part of it, if you didn't do it, you would be, charges would be brought up. So, and, they think U.S. is free, and now it is. I mean, we still have the draft. I mean, when you're 18 in the U.S., you still have to file with Selective Service. Just when the pretty much right when you turn 18, you file for selective service. You never have to do it again, but your name's always in a database somewhere. I've probably aged out of it because I think it's like, able-bodied males between 18 and 45. So I think I've aged out of it, but the Russians are, the younger ones that I was talking about, the YouTubers, it's pretty much the same situation, just reversed, the Russian side. They're having trouble with troop numbers and, if the casualty numbers are accurate, they have to get more people. And, you may, again, conscientiously object to the war or to whatever, but again, you're going to be brought up on charges. So, some people will go, some people won't. It's going to be very much of a similar situation as it was here during the Vietnam era. So, just sort of interesting, history. And then, of course, New York sues Trump, good Lord. Fraud, are this deal, and hey, I don't even want to get into that, but I want to stay in the UFO topic. So UFOs caught. There's the Joe Rogan. Let's see what else they got here. Yeah, on December 18th, 2018, President Trump signed a memorandum establishing the U.S. Space Command, and a lot of people, or the Space Force, Space Command's a little bit older. That should have said Space Force, and it has another branch of the U.S. Armed Forces. But from what I heard, he was sort of against it. He sort of didn't care about it or whatever, and then he was brought out to San Diego. And that was about the time the San Diego David Fraver, the F-18 pilot, the Tic-Tac UFO that he talks about, that was also another Rogan episode, and he was also on Lex Friedman, David Fraver was. But I think they showed him something, or showed him some footage or radar, and then literally he came back and signed that memorandum establishing the U.S. Space Force. Absolutely, it was. Poor quality. Criticism because of poor quality. Usually they get the most criticism when they're the best quality. Then it's like fake. It's computer generated CGI. So if it's poor quality, it's getting criticism too. No. Normally the poor quality is the most reliable because it's actually... in my investigative background experience, it's harder to fake a low-quality video convincingly than it is to do one through CGI and like a bright lit during the day, some ship flying over or whatever. Yeah, this video, it's a year or so old, but government officials come forward. Yeah, they had a hearing, I want to say it was earlier this year, on the Tic-Tac, the AATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, the Pentagon program, the Lou Elizondo, and the Jeremy Corbell, the Ad Astra, that type of stuff. But they actually had some hearings. They were pretty vanilla. They didn't really, they didn't get into it any more than what we've gotten from the media. But I watched the whole thing, and there were a few instances where they said, we can't talk about this. We have to do it in a classified session. So I don't know if it was Senate or the House. I think it was maybe Senate hearings. So they said, we can't do it during an open session. We have to go to a classified session. So they know more than what they're telling us, even though the congressional hearings were supposed to sort of, let us know what's going on. They didn't. And even though there's been news and from that area, and they did establish like a program, like an additional program, I forget the name of that one, to continue identifying the UAPs, as they call them now, the unidentified aerial phenomena. It's still just so vanilla. They don't really put anything groundbreaking out, even though there's plenty to put out. I mean, this past week, I think I saw, UFOs over Ukraine. I think that was like a recent article. Cosmic and phantom UFOs are all over Ukraine skies. Government reports claim. That was a week ago. So that was Yahoo News. Are there UFOs, UAPs in the skies above the Ukraine? Study says yes. That's like the Jerusalem Times or Post. Let's see if there's any videos. UFO spotted in Ukraine. Astronomers shocked. I think that's the one I saw earlier. I mean, look at all those above the clouds there. U.S. intelligence agencies say these flying objects are too fleeting to identify. Well, if they're too fleeting, and they're not ours, and most likely they're not Russia's or China's or any other country, they're aliens. Extraterrestrial. Both of those words just mean foreign. When you're talking about aliens in the sky, alien means basically somebody who's an extraterrestrial, not of this earth. Outside of this earth. That's what extraterrestrial means. So, if you can't identify it, it's probably not one of ours. And I don't know how real that picture is. That's the first time I've seen it, but if that's real, then that's definitely out of this world. I mean, even if it's maybe drones above the clouds shooting lasers down at the ground, it still takes a pretty coordinated effort, most likely with the radar and the stuff that we've given the Ukraine. They would be able to know if they were friendly or foreign, on Earth, just other bogeys from Russia or some other place, another entity, another organization. So it's just the fact that astronomers, the U.S. intelligence, nobody has any idea what it all is. Yeah, that's saying a lot. Okay, that was it. So, yeah. Well, I'm about 25 minutes in. I think I covered what I wanted to cover here, But I think really, like I said, what it ultimately comes down to is with everything going on in this world, with the threat of wars and nuclear annihilation and everything, hopefully before that happens, if there are little friendly, benevolent, good guys up in the sky, I'm hoping that they will make an appearance before that happens. Or as they've supposedly done in the past during the Cold War, if nuclear weapons are about to be launched, hopefully they'll hover over those bases and deactivate those weapons. That's a whole nother thing to get into, but hopefully they will deactivate those weapons before we're able to annihilate ourselves and make themselves known. Sort of goes back to a Ronald Reagan. Let me pull up one more video. The Reagan speech in front of the UN. Let's see, Reagan. UN UFO speech. or alien speech. Yeah, the address to the United Nations. That's the long version. There's probably a cut version here. Yeah, let me revise that a little bit, alien. It's getting harder and harder to find these days. There's all the full ones. Alien threat. But that's like a mix. Hold on. Let's click that one.
I couldn't help at one point in my discussions privately with General Secretary Gorbachev, when you stop to think that we're all God's children wherever we may live in the world, I couldn't help but say to him, just think how easy his task and mine might be in these meetings that we held if suddenly there was a threat to this world from some other species, from another planet, outside in the universe. We'd forget all the little local differences that we have between our countries, and we would find out once and for all that we really are all human beings here on this earth together. Well, I don't suppose we can wait for some alien race to come down and threaten us, but I think that between us we can bring about that realization. In our obsession with antagonisms of the moment, we often forget how much unites all the members of humanity. Perhaps we need some outside universal threat to make us recognize this common bound. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war? I think maybe I'd answer it this way. I keep, in my frustration sometimes, you know, actually, if you count some of the things going on in smaller countries and all, there have been about 114 wars since World War II. But I've often wondered, what if all of us in the world discovered that we were threatened by an outer power from outer space, from another planet?
From another planet.
Wouldn't we all of a sudden find that we didn't have any differences between us at all? We were all human beings, citizens of the world, and wouldn't we come together to fight that particular threat?
Wow. That was 3 different speeches of his, much on the same topic of the threat from outer space, as he said, from another planet. And this is another video that, again, it's out there. It's right in front of everybody. You can find this. I just YouTubed it and it came right up. Of course, it was the bigger version, you know, that where you may not have listened long enough to hear it, but I finally found this little 2-minute and 21-second clip of Reagan, who probably was one of the most influential presidents when it came to the Strategic Air Command and the Star Wars program, which was basically like a defense system. That's a whole nother rabbit hole to go down at another time, but he knew. He was probably one of the last presidents who really knew, because after him it was Bush. Now, Bush knew. He knew about the same thing that Reagan did, but after him it was Clinton. Clinton, George Jr., then Obama, and then Trump. And after pretty much Reagan and George Sr., none of the other presidents have been brought into the fray, brought into the know to know what's going on, but they did. Reagan and you know, Bush Sr. did. They knew. Now, Bush Sr. was only in there for 4 years, like Trump. He was the only 4-year president, you know, before Trump. Well, no, Garfield was too, I think. And there was a few. There were others. I'm not going to get into that, but in recent times, you know, typically people who know what's going on or who are actually trying to change things are the ones that they attacked the most. Now, Reagan did serve 2 terms, but a lot of people compare what happened to Trump, the attacks by the media and everything. The same thing happened to Reagan during his administrations. But Reagan obviously is much more articulate and charismatic, and he was able to deflect those attacks and be the great president that he was. So just going to leave it at that. I mean, let's play just a little bit of that beginning part again here.
Gorbachev, when you stop to think that we're all God's children, wherever we may live in the world,
Or
I
universe.
couldn't help but say to him, just think how easy his task and mine might be in these meetings that we held if suddenly there was a threat to this world from some other species, from another planet, outside in the universe. We'd forget all the little local differences that we have between our countries, and we would find out once and for all that we really are all human beings here on this earth together.
We would all be united. And when we're all united, the government loses their power. Everybody loses their power. All the institutions lose their power. When the people are united against a common threat, and I'm not even saying the extraterrestrials would be a threat. They may seem like that at first, but they may be, again, benevolent. So we don't know until it happens. But it's food for thought. Food for thought. So I'm going to slowly fade back out here. So everybody have a good night. Research some of this, and I think if you really dig around and follow the rabbit hole that I've sort of led you down the path of, you'll find some good information.